We are
Thank you, everyone.
transitioning to our next session, and it's going to be a fireside chat. Our community is fired up about it. Future of B2B marketing. Welcome to the show, Jon Miller and Carilu Dietrich. Super pumped for this. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. I'm sorry I felt like I was interrupting the last one logging in. So it's nice to see all of you. Happy day, and thanks for hosting us, Julia.
Yeah, it's just an endless loop for 3 days, 6 hours long. So let's
A lot
go.
of a lot of awesome content, but this is going to be the most awesome of all the content because we have
I'm
Carol.
I'm pretty excited about it. John and I got an hour over the last month, and I never get enough time with him. Super excited to interview him today. Co-founder of Marketo, founder of Engagio, hosting us today to talk a little bit about his stealth startup in the AI space. So we have lots to talk about. I guess first I'll just introduce myself. My name is Carilu Dietrich. I'm a former CMO, most notably the head of marketing that took Atlassian public. And these days, I advise CEOs and CMOs of hypergrowth companies, companies like 1Password, Sprout Social, Bill.com, and others. And I write a blog at carilu.com where I share some of their best practices. And one of the reasons I advise CEOs and CMOs is because a lot of the marketing problems aren't just marketing execution problems, but business strategy problems. And John and I are going to talk about that today, and the role of the CMO to be more of a business strategist. So John, how much are you sharing with the public about your stealth AI company? What can you share with us today?
Well, first off, let me say I'm as excited to talk to you as I think you are to talk to me. And I hope that it's a conversation, not just an interview, because like you've got obviously so many things to say. And I want to just, give a quick shout out, to your blog and your Substack. It's really good. Your post today about, leadership at gunpoint was really, really awesome. So thank you for sharing that story.
Well, I really appreciate that.
Uh,
Um, you've been writing a lot that marketing is broken and that the old ways of doing things that you helped invent are not getting the same kind of traction. And part of that is because of the change in AI behavior. Part of that is because of the overwhelm. But I presume that's kind of what's behind this latest company. You're going to help us build some tech that is native to how things are now. Like, how are you
yeah.
thinking about that?
Yeah. So for the company specifically, we are still stealth and we will be for, a few more months at least. But you're exactly right. I've been in marketing technology for 19 years. I helped build, I think, some of the leading platforms of the old era. And I think that, we have basically a new era, which we're going to talk about, where marketing is changing. And I don't think that the platforms of the old era are going to, meet the needs of today. So I'm trying to create, an AI, a marketing platform for the AI era is probably the kind of the best way to describe that.
And
But
what's broken now? What's not working for marketers that you're seeing most?
yeah, exactly. So, we've been for 15 plus years now. I think there's been kind of a standard playbook that I helped to preach that people should do. And it starts with using, content, and to kind of, gate the content to capture leads, and then you nurture them and score them and pass them to an SDR at the right time. Maybe you have some outbound SDRs, prospecting into accounts as well. And you try to make the whole thing really measurable. I'm going to do this many campaigns. I'm going to get this many MQLs, and for a while that worked, but I think two main things, well, let's say three main things, I think have started to make it kind of really fall apart. The first one is that, I call it the tragedy of the commons. Everybody started doing those tactics and buyers started to get overwhelmed, and to the point that they learned to kind of opt out and tune out and toss out, all that content, all that emails. They don't want yet another ebook. They've learned to become anonymous. They've learned if they fill out the form to get the ebook, they're going to start getting unwanted phone calls. And it's just not working. Second, and I think more insidious, if you will, is that there was a mindset to the traditional playbook that, oh, I can just run another campaign and I'll get more MQLs. And I think it taught marketers and executives, boards and CFOs and all that, to sort of think of marketing as like a simple gumball machine where, you can put your quarter in and you get your candy out. But the reality is marketing doesn't work that way. Marketing is a complex system, not a simple machine. It's non complex systems are nonlinear, and you know, and so what ended up happening is we kept trying to do these sort of, put the quarter into the machine and it wasn't working. And so we just started trying to do more quarters. And that was ultimately not only ineffective, but actually hurt the customer relationship. And so we're seeing that today. We're seeing companies are struggling to create enough pipeline. We're seeing rising costs, to generate pipeline, decreasing go-to-market productivity, SDR productivity going down, and perhaps worst of all, CMO tenures are about as short as they ever have been. So something's got to change. And then you mentioned that, AI. So I'll let you cue it up. But I think that's the third thing that's going on.
Right. And so in summary, it's really kind of the overwhelm that customers are feeling, the kind of stalkedness in a
Yeah.
in a experience that's not right for them. So is it really that we have to reimagine the experience that the customer is having instead of like the way we can use our systems to reach them?
Well, I think that in many ways we, but in treating marketing like a machine, we treated, potential customers as leads to be captured, and not relationships to be built. And in trying to tune this machine, I think we sort of lost the soul of marketing. In terms of trying to make it measurable, we lost the meaning. And at the end of the day, we could debate what is the purpose of marketing. I'm curious kind of how you would define it. But I would say one of the most important purposes is to create an emotional connection in the hearts and minds of our buyer. And that doesn't happen with a gumball machine mentality. And I guess that's at the core of what I'm sort of talking about with the old playbook not working. In
And
some ways,
and we
we need back to the basics.
And we can come back, we'll come back to AI because we'll talk about AI a lot. But I mean, what's been interesting is you really come from this demand generation background, but one of the things you're talking about is really more brand building and experience. And this is coming at a time when, SEO, which was a brand building technique many of us use to kind of be practically helpful about the brand, is really kind of imploding. I mean, CMOs are telling me they're losing anywhere between 15 and 25% of their top of funnel from some of their traditional, like, how does it work, educational content, which brought people into their brand. But I mean, it sounds like this connection is these brands and experiences, not just the digital execution of demand gen.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is I think, we, we lost, I think we focused so much on demand generation that I think we sort of, underinvested in brand creation, because it's less measurable, right? So if you put all if you try to make everything measurable, you're going to put everything into things that are measurable, right? But I think, that'll miss out on kind of ultimately where things need to really happen. And it's the complex machinery that we were just talking about. You know, there's great research out there. Sixth Sense has been talking about the fact that by the time somebody actually kind of raises their hand, becomes in market and ready to buy, 80% of the time they already know who their preferred vendor is, right? And so if we're not, if what you're doing is, oh, I have intent data and I'm going to find out who are people in market and then I'm going to reach out, you're too late. Like we've got to find a way to start building preference and engagement, with potential buyers before they raise their hands, in this world where they want to be anonymous, where they aren't necessarily even coming to our website. It's a different playbook.
And I feel like it's both a different playbook, and I also always feel like everything old is new again. Like I've had some of these conversations recently about like, shit, SEO is going to change the way we can deliver this year because we used it for so much of our inbound top of funnel. Maybe we
Yeah.
should start creating our own lists, like a newsletter, you know, or you know, provide really helpful, you know, thought leadership that like brings people in, like by investing more in social or investing more in events. You know, some of which is like new and some of which is new as old again. What are some like, I don't know, 3 to 5 of the most important tactics you think are important for CEOs to reinvest or CMOs to reinvest in today's landscape?
Yep. All right. Well, before I get to that, I kind of want to unpack some things that I think are important, to set up here, right? So the first thing is we could talk the whole time about this, but there's this idea of revenue marketing, right? And marketers, we want to be tied to revenue. And there's a whole discussion on LinkedIn, I think late last week, around the fact that, you know, it, revenue marketing to a lot of people seems to be demand gen, MQL creation, the stuff that's kind of, measurable. I'd argue that we need to redefine what revenue marketing even is, right? Revenue marketing is, are you impacting long-term revenue? Are you, and are you supporting the efforts of the entire go-to-market team? And that's what, back to, we need to invest in brand and some of these other factors. So that was the first thing I wanted to back. The second thing is we sort of talked a little bit about AI and bounced off of it a little bit. So I think AI is starting to have and will have even larger impacts on how people buy, and that I don't think is getting enough attention. So you already mentioned the drop in SEO traffic, right? We're seeing that because of zero-click search. AI is summarizing the results, and therefore I never even need to go to the website. Let's think about email, right? Email is still the #1 channel people use to prospect and reach out to customers and interact and be, at least in B2B. There already is this thing, if you use Google, called the promotions tab, right? That is a form of AI deciding which emails go into the priority inbox and which ones go to promotions. That's just going to get more and more. We are not that far away from having an AI agent that sits in our inbox and basically says, here are the emails you need to pay attention to. I've already drafted a reply for you. You can ignore all this other stuff, right? And what's going to happen to our open rates and our click rates and our email is exactly what's happening to our web traffic right today. So, no matter what the channel is, we're entering this world where traditional digital marketing can get disintermediated by AI, and AI will be summarizing all that content for us. So sounds scary, but now to get to your question, like, okay, what should we be doing? In this new playbook, we have to build brand, but we can't do it with some of the old stuff. We need to focus on the things that AI can't summarize. And I think that's probably my most important takeaway. What is the marketing that AI can't summarize? And, for simplicity, I would just break that down into 3 categories, right? Number 1, experiences, right? Chris Penn likes to say a photograph of my vacation to Hawaii is not the same as actually feeling the sand, my feet in the sand in Hawaii, right? You cannot summarize an experience. I was at a dinner with other CEOs last night, and, maybe, the content I learned about how people are using AI and go to market, maybe you could like write a blog post about that, but it would not be the same as the experience I had, drinking penicillin cocktails with, with these other CEOs and talking about go to market. So I mean, dinners and other in-person experiences and events, I think, are an increasingly important part of the new playbook. Number 1. Number 2, relationships. Again, what's old is new, right? But there's no substitute for somebody you trust saying, I vouch for this company, this content, this information. It's why we're seeing such a rise in ecosystem or partner-led growth. It's also why we see folks like you and others basically building their brands as B2B influencers, right? That is a kind of relationship, when you have kind of a trusted influencer. It's why you have executives building their presence on LinkedIn, because that's, again, you're forming kind of that trusted relationship. It's why communities are so important part of marketing today, because, again, it's all about relationships. In some ways, I think it's sort of like what we see in the media, right? We've gotten to a very fractured media landscape where regardless of your politics, you might see different media than I see because we trust the source. But we basically whitelisted certain places that we trust, right? I think that's what's going to happen, right? In our buying too. Like I trust this source. Carilu's, newsletter says this is a good thing. I'm going to trust that, right? So investing in these relationships is number two. And then number three, I think does come back to content and thought leadership and creativity, but what it has to, in terms of the content that we're creating, it has to be things that AI couldn't create itself.
Mhm.
It's got to be something truly original because AI is really good at remixing things that already exist, but is not good at coming up with something truly, truly original. So that could be because it's really creative. It can be because it's actually new thinking that doesn't exist yet, true thought leadership. Or it can be, and one of my favorite examples that's the easiest to scale is original research based upon proprietary data,
Mhm.
right? Gong does this really, really well. Carta does this really, really well. Like they have information about what works in sales calls or what do companies, how do they structure their cap tables and their fundraising? And they publish this data in a way that is really valuable to their audience. And only that company can do that because only they have access to that data. And AI cannot generate that content with a prompt. So anyway, long answer, but experiences, relationships, and truly original content, I think are kind of the three strategies I'd point to in the age of AI.
I love it. I'd like to unpack them kind of each. I think we could probably do a webinar on each, but we'll at least give them a couple minutes. I love Peter's work at Carta. He's one of the folks that I follow most closely. And he kind of combines that like building a relationship as a person, right? Carta republishes his content, but they really have this like data expert that's the
Yep.
face. Peter and I know each other personally, and he pitched this job because he was interested in being this kind of person that was like the face of really great data and being able to analyze um and write about and engage with people over the data. Um,
Agreed.
so so when I think about those, one of the ones that's hardest for a lot of marketers is actually building personality as a company. So like, let's talk about, community. You can have user meetups and user groups or user conferences. There's kind of a playbook for that. Experiences and thought leadership, like data thought leadership is amazing. There's some other examples I might want to talk about when we dig in there. But I see a lot of folks, there's a couple companies where the CEO has gotten really good at LinkedIn and cares and just gets this massive viral following. And then there's all these marketers in the world that are trying so hard to make their brand page relevant. But no one's really interacting with brand pages. Like people are interacting with people and personalities. And it's really tricky for people to get some of their executives involved. Even some social media companies don't have particularly social
Yeah.
executives. Like how do you think about navigating this, like kind of tying what AI can't be, which is like a person with thoughts and ideas and feelings and insights to a marketing strategy?
Well, I think you got to start like it's not everybody, right? You're not going to get every executive to suddenly become an influencer or a thought leader out on LinkedIn. I actually got to have the opportunity to have dinner one night with Nicole Bear, who's the CMO of Carta. And so Peter works, I think, somewhere in her
Yeah, yeah,
organization.
yeah. He works for her.
And, like she was smart enough to go make sure to, have a guy like Peter on her team. Like she's like, all right, it's not gonna be her, it's not gonna be the CEO of Carta, but let's really empower Peter to go do it. When I was CMO at Demandbase, I'll be honest, one of my biggest regrets is I was trying sort of at the end of my tenure to get something spin up, demand-based labs in somebody to kind of do the same thing, and I wasn't successful in kind of giving it enough life before I left that it kind of continued. But Nicole's done a great job on that. So I think that's, it's really important to, if it's not you, to empower somebody to do it. And just recognize that that is uh, key, you know. You can also build influencer marketing programs, where ideally you have your own influencer on staff as well. But you can, I think, invest budget and time and energy in cultivating relationships with the other creators out there. B2C companies have been doing that for 5 years, and B2B companies should be catching up. So I
One
know
of
I'm not going to answer your question directly, but
No, you
just
did. I mean, it's
specifically,
tough, right? There's a different strategy for every company. At Atlassian, I actually set aside a headcount and we hired someone from like deep in the bowels of engineering and program management who became ultimately Dominic Price, who ultimately, is on stage with the CEO of Virgin America, and is speaking, has a TED Talk with like 1 million followers. And there was always this aspect where I was like slightly jealous. I was like, that was awesome. Why didn't I do that? And you're like, oh, because I'm running a massive operational machine. And some of the time you need for thought and writing and engaging and speaking and traveling isn't the same as operational leadership.
totally.
But I'll say the other thing that I'm seeing now is, I think this is always true, but marketing has never been just marketing's job. Like maybe it can be at a B2C company, but at a tech company, you really need engineering and product management. You need like thought leadership out of the technical ranks to
Yep.
to, to be to get really tight traction with technical audiences. So again, at Atlassian, we had someone in kind of engineering program management.
Sure.
And like earlier in my career, we had product managers that would write white papers or do some of this data analysis because they were closest to the technical product. So I guess I would just encourage marketers that, you could have a face, but, you've got to make sure that you're getting the right depth of thought leadership for technical audiences from the right technical departments.
Yeah, that's fair. And it varies by company. I mean, I've always had, my whole career, I've marketed to marketers, and as a marketer, I therefore become a very obvious person to kind of go do that. But if you market to CFOs, it's different, and
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge that. Two other quick things I'll say, regardless, if you decide it is something you're going to do, right? You want this to be part of your personal world. If you're a CEO or a CMO or something, the advice I have is just sometimes you got to still do stuff that makes you uncomfortable. I personally do not like being on camera. Like I can do something like this all day long, but like actually hit record and I need to sort of like talk, you know, just into the camera. It's awkward as all hell, but I decided I have to do it because, it's important, and I started doing these videos. You may have seen them on LinkedIn where I, make a cocktail and I talk about marketing. And the first one I did, I showed it to my wife and she was like, "You're no Stanley Tucci." And I'm
Tough
like,
crowd,
"You're right.
tough crowd.
I have not spent as much time in front of the camera as Stanley Tucci has." But the second one was a little better, and the third one was a little better, and the fourth one was a little better. And I think that's just the advice I have is, sometimes you just have to start doing it and you'll get better at it.
So let's turn left and get into where else AI is going to totally change marketing. And I think one of the main places is personalization. Um, like if you can catch them at the right time, or they do come to your site or subscribe to your newsletter or participate in something you're doing, how are you thinking that the next era of MarTech is going to help us with personalization and data analysis and all of that?
Yeah, I guess I first think that a lot of marketers are spending time and energy in the wrong place. Which is trying to have AI personalize the content. You know, and we see that the most with this massive rise in AI SDRs, driven also by tools like Clay. Um, Now, first off, I'm a big fan of Clay, and kind of, how they can turn unstructured data into structured data to support all aspects of your go-to-market. But most people are using it to feed into automated SDR prospecting, which, ends up with, emails that are, seem personalized because AI has researched with the school I went to and can reference the football game that we won or lost last weekend, from my team, and stick that into an email that seems like it got personalized, or whatever, referring the weather in my local city in that day, or naming a local restaurant. I mean, there's lots of I've seen lots of examples of these things, but it's not it's not it's just more gumball machine thinking, I think, and it's not personalization that is truly in the spirit of, is this making it better for that prospect or that customer? And
So tell
so,
me more what you think would be the dream realized.
yeah. Well, so I so number one, it's, the main use of AI, I don't think is going to be crafting personalized emails. Where I do think the value is, I'd like to sort of, refer back to my Instagram feed, that, when I log on to Instagram. I'm not a TikTok user, maybe I should be, but I do use Instagram. And, when I look at my Instagram, it's quite engaging. Right? The stuff there is interesting. And I would say even the ads are pretty good. Right? What have they done? They have personalized my feed, effectively, almost like Spotify. They've given me a playlist that is, personalized to me based on my interests and what I found engaging. That's AI, right? Why can't we apply AI in B2B to deliver the same level of relevance and personalization to the playlist of interactions that we send to our customers, right? That's where I think AI needs to be going around personalization, is literally personalizing the playlist more than personalizing the content.
And it's funny because what it makes me think about is how difficult change management is. When I think about rolling out new tools and all the different tools I've rolled out over my career, sometimes the tool can be great, but trying to get the sales org and marketing org in alignment to use it, there's been times where the sales org doesn't want you emailing customers they're engaging with, but you feel like you can like surface this right playlist. So can we surface the playlist to salespeople? Can we think about our enablement through these like multivariant paths instead of like a linear
Should be
sales
thinking,
cycle? I mean, how are you thinking about the change management of
yeah,
just
well,
like how team processes work? This is going to change everything.
first off, we shouldn't be thinking about multivariate Visio flows, if this, then that branching. I mean, that's going to quickly become spaghetti and is the opposite of what I'm saying, right? What I'm saying is, each person and account should have a personalized playlist of interactions, that's right for them. Um, Now, if a salesperson,
Philosophically, your stealth tech stack surfaces that to the right people at the right time. I mean, I'm calling it multivariant, but it's the same thing. If every sales rep has a different thing, what marketing recommends sales reps use at a certain time becomes a totally different game.
well, but my point is, like, if a salesperson sends somebody an email, right, then whatever playlist that person's receiving should know about that email that the salesperson sent and adjust and respond appropriately so that you're not sending too many things or disjointed messages, right? And I think that's what it means to kind of have an AI that is curating this playlist for you, right? I
Across
mean,
all channels,
across all
across
the
ads
channels
that are showing up and things we want to send them and all the
that,
rest.
that it can. Oh, look, we have an image here. So we're talking about, I don't know, one of these on here. Yeah, well, anyway. So yeah, so playlists, I think, should handle the change management by being smart about understanding what's happening across the customer experience. And fundamentally, I think what goes on behind the scenes there is it's a move from a campaign first model to a customer first model, right? So think about what most marketers do today is they run a campaign, right? I have a webinar. It's scheduled for Wednesday next week. So tomorrow I am going to send an email to invite people to that. And then 2 days later, anyone who hasn't responded, I'm going to send another email. And maybe I'm really clever. And for my top 100 accounts, I also ask my SDRs to do some personalized outreach, right? That's a campaign first mentality, right? But if you move to this more customer first mentality, I'll go back to my Spotify analogy, right? We're crafting playlists for each person, right? The marketer's job isn't to run the campaign. The marketer's job is to create the songs, right? And think about it. In some ways, that lets us really lean into our creativity, right? How do I create the best songs possible? The ones that are going to really resonate with my audience, that are going to be really engaging, really useful. Imagine if all of our time and energy went there and not into, well, I got to manage this micro segment versus that segment, so I don't email them at the same time, and I have to have this whole meeting once a week where all the marketers get together and talk about which campaigns are we sending, and make sure there's no overlap, and like, just, man, it's enough to make pull your hair out, right? And that's none of that is in the spirit of doing right by the customer, right? It's just the complexity of the old playbook.
And how much of this is vision versus what you think marketers are going to be able to roll out in the next 6, 12, or 18 months? Because what I'm hearing on, like, let's say the SDR front is that things that are fully automated still have a lot of hallucination or don't feel quite right. So what's working best is like a recommendation engine that comes to a human who then approves it and uses it. So it's like an accelerant versus a replacement.
Yep.
This playlist concept, how far out is this relative to the challenges of putting AI on autopilot?
Well, it's a technology thing and a change management thing, as you said, right? And the technology will be there. The technology has to be there as a prerequisite, for the people to kind of accept the change. What will probably end up happening is we're going to be in a hybrid world for a while, right? Where let's say the technology exists, marketers will still run some of their traditional campaigns, and yet, but maybe the AI takes over more of the nurture, and maybe marketers start saying they're trusting the AI, like, okay, I still gonna invite you to this campaign, but maybe they let the AI figure out what time of day to send it, right? Little things like that. And over time, I think, we will see, as they can see what's going on, they'll see more trust, in kind of what's, is going on there. Um, so yeah, the tech first, change management follows that.
And so, how, I think most marketers this year are struggling with what we talk about every year, but feels even more pointed this year, that we have to do more with less. For the last several years, we just had to do more with less because there was less. And then this year, what I've seen in a lot of financial plans is a return to higher growth rates, but budget's not growing at that same rate. And at the same time, we've got this big loss of SEO at the top of the funnel that people are trying to kind of overcome. And these new investments in AI, right? There's all these things that we're all juggling. How do you see, when do you see AI providing some relief in accelerating growth relative to being like a big change management and tech cost for people to kind of shift away from what they've had before?
I think there's going to be some bumps along the road. I don't think you can get where where we need to be by just adding some AI candy on top of our existing tech stacks. Whether that's existing vendors adding an AI feature, or the ability to go buy some magical tool that will somehow make my legacy tech stack better, right? I think we are going to need to go through a infrastructure evolution. In much the same way that you had to for telecommunications, right? We, went from landlines to mobile, right? But like that, there some technology transition needed to happen. Um, and the problem is people are really scared of change. When they start, when they think about their tech stacks. They're like, I've got this, I'll pick on Marketo, right? Which, I helped start. Marketo's 19 years old, right? So people look at their Marketo and they're like, yeah, it hasn't really innovated much recently. And it's got all these problems, but at least I know how to work around the problems. And I've built all this stuff, that sort of somehow make it work, and it's bailing, duct tape and bailing wire or whatever, but it works at least sort of most of the time. I'm terrified of changing it, and yet you have no chance of adapting to this new playbook if you don't change it. And I think what needs to happen is that people need to recognize that the risk of staying still is significantly greater than the risk of moving forward. But that's not going to happen overnight.
And I was talking to Sydney Sloan, the CMO of G2, over the last
Sure.
couple of weeks, and she's just seeing that she expects there to be some sort of consolidation of martech and sales tech, and maybe as a GTM tech. But as if we're reorienting around the customer experience, you can't really, there isn't a dividing line between marketing and sales as much if it's this dynamic playlist that's really surrounding the customer. Like, do you think that the tech stacks for sales and marketing are gonna converge in the years to come? I mean, because there's the Marketo and Salesforce, right? Or it's the
Yeah.
HubSpot.
Like I don't think those two categories come together. You know, ultimately, I might be wrong, but what I generally assume happens, as long as there are different departments, there will be different
All have their own
technologies
tech.
that are owned by those departments. Um, Now, it's really important that those technologies talk to each other, right? Just like Marketo and Salesforce had a really, really good integration. Um, I think where we'll see tech stack consolidation is with kind of more within the department, right? Do you really need a marketing automation platform and an ABM platform? One for leads and one for accounts? Like, I don't know. Forrester certainly says no, that you don't need both of those things. Um, where I think it gets blurry is around SDRs, right? Is marketing should SDR check be part of the marketing stack or the sales stack? In some ways. Um, so yeah, there'll be some consolidation, but I don't think, there's like one go-to-market revenue platform to rule them all.
I'm sure Salesforce would want to be. We'll see if they can get there.
They want to be the one vendor for all those things, but I don't even think they would say it's all going to be one platform, right? As opposed to multiple products that integrate together.
Let's talk a little bit about this trend. A number of people have been talking about over the last several years in the CMO crowd, but I know that you've taken up recently as well. Christine Heckart, who was the CMO of Cisco, says that she was part of naming chief marketing officer. Before that, there wasn't a chief marketing officer, but she feels like she made a mistake and it should have been chief market officer because it should be more about strategy and less about the ING.
Yep.
And you feel like this new wave of technology is only going to put more pressure on CMOs to be more chief market officers and business strategists. Can you share more of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways, at the core, it comes to what I said a few minutes ago around redefining what revenue marketing means and really redefining what marketing means, right? And I think too many marketers, especially in B2B tech, have focused only on one of the P's, promotion. at the cost of the other three P's, and got too focused on being like this like MQL generating machine. Um, when what we're talking about, the new playbook is things like building your brand. Building on which how do you build your brand? Well, you do it by understanding the market and understanding the customer, right? And by creating experiences that might have an impact, in a way that's very nonlinear and unmeasurable, right? So I, at the end of the day, I don't care what people call themselves in terms of their title, right? But I think we marketing executives need to have conversations with their CEOs and CFOs and boards about how the function has changed and how what worked in the old playbook isn't going to work today and tomorrow, especially because of AI. And so we need to think about what is the role of this function and of this leader, and how do we measure this function? How do we assign budgets to this function? All that's got to change. You have to have those conversations. And if having the conversation around being a chief market officer versus a chief marketing officer is a way to have that conversation, then I'm all for it. Um, but to me, it's a means to the end.
It's interesting because I started my career in sales and then I went on to marketing. And when I decided I wanted to be a CMO, I did a tour of duty in every function, thinking that's how you became a CMO. Like, here's my demand gen era and my product marketing era and my data era and my events and community era. Um, and, you know, in some ways, I wish that I'd spent a couple of years in management consulting and had like a real business era. Of course, the trajectory of everything would be different, so you can never trade off the past. But the higher I got, the more I felt like I needed business alignment. And when I look at the results of AI, and I use AI every day across all sorts of different projects, it's the discernment that's the most important skill. And I think that remains for CMOs. There's really hard trade-offs to make when you're in brand because there's no right answer. And you kind of have to like have some confidence and take a stand in your executive suite about a way that you're going to talk to the market or a way you're going to position yourself. And we've been through different phases. There was like the category creation phase, and then there's don't create a
Yep.
category, but this kind of like how do you become a strategist? And I was having a conversation a couple of years ago with the CMO who had told me, when I come into a new role, the first thing I hire is like a marketing strategist, or I hire a competitive benchmarker, or, I have these people that do the work so that I can be really strategic. And when
Uh-huh.
I'm looking at this AI landscape, to me, I'm wondering if there's new roles. Like there's going to be a playlist operator that's not exactly the same as like the marketing ops and analyst who was like analyzing the data, because it's a little bit more of a product marketer, but it's kind of a product marketer who's an optimizer. Like, have you, I mean, I know this is like philosophical, but you and I are old enough to remember when there was one person on the team who was the digital marketer. And then, of course, all of us are digital marketers. Like, all of us are kind of AI people right now, but it seems like there's going to be a role in marketing for some sort of AI experts that do something. What is that kind of role? And does that come out of marketing ops? Does it come out of product marketing?
I don't know is the first answer, right? We're all guessing on some of these things, but my hunch is that that is how the marketing operations role evolves. I think that marketing operations today spends probably too much of their time punching buttons in Marketo or HubSpot or Pardot or Eloqua, and not enough time, working at this kind of higher level of strategy. Um, you know, I think, in some ways, organizationally, I alluded to this a minute ago, but what I think will happen, and I'm excited for it to happen, is for the folks that today we'd call demand gen marketers or field marketers, right? For them to evolve more towards probably segment marketers, people who are thinking customer first and say, okay, I'm responsible for marketing to this population. how do I use my creativity to craft the songs, that will resonate and engage that population. So that way, when the AI DJ is figuring out the best thing for each playlist, it's got the right enough to work with, and you know, I, I'm excited for that for marketing because I think that's frankly what a lot of marketers got into marketing to do, right? To be creative and to really create campaigns that engage and resonate with buyers, right? That's in some ways, I think the hope for AI, right, is that if we can get to a world where AI is handling more of the tactical details, that humans can actually be free to focus on experiences and relationships and truly original content. Or I think as you alluded to a minute ago, if AI is doing the ing in marketing, then we can focus on the market.
Mhm, mhm. I'm excited. It's never, it's fun that technology and technology marketing keeps evolving. There's always so much to learn and so many surprises.
Yeah. And
If
and,
only
and
there were less pressure.
yeah, everything I just said is I'm guessing, right? We don't we
Of course.
it might play out very differently. The speed of change right now is as fast as it's ever been.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that's so fascinating about this shift is there's not people you can already hire who are, decade-long experts, except in like machine learning AI, which we've been doing for longer, but now we get to rebrand again. But a lot of this is learning on the go and people who are willing to take chances raising their hand.
Yeah.
I want to ask one quick round question, and then we'll take. I'll look at a couple of the questions that we've had from the chat because we have about 10 minutes left. Um, where should people be learning? Like, so they can follow you on LinkedIn. Who are you reading, and what are you watching to stay abreast of all of this?
Yeah. I mean, LinkedIn is my go-to. I sort of alluded to my Instagram feed's pretty good and relevant. My LinkedIn feed has more garbage in there than I'd want, but there's also a lot of really good nuggets in there. Some of the folks that I would point to that I definitely like learning from, I think on the AI side, Chris Penn from Trust Insights is, his weekly newsletter is a must read for me. And Kieran Flanagan also has, I think, had some really good advice on how to use AI in marketing. There are others out there that have some good stuff there. A lesser known person that I would point everybody to is Kathleen Schwab. She was the head of the CMO practice for IDC, I think, if I'm getting that right. She has a book coming out that does a way better job than I could ever do of explaining how marketing is a complex nonlinear system that cannot be tuned and optimized like a machine, and therefore, what are the implications for all of us? Which is, I think, at the core of this kind of whole new playbook. So I think she's great. I already said I like your Substack, and there's some other really good Substacks out there as well that I also think people should be checking out.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so the question I wanted to go back to, if we have time, which we do, is talking about some of the best impactful content and best original impactful content. We talked about Carta already. They have this like unique data and have done this data analysis. What are some other examples? And then I have one I'm excited to share.
I'd love to hear if you have more, because I always go back to Gong and Carta as kind of the two best examples that I've seen. In particular, people who are producing uh, fact-based research based on their own data. As obviously I worked at Demandbase and we competed against 6sense, but I alluded to the research that Carrie Cunningham does over there. I think that's not analyzing their data, that's just analyzing surveys, but it's still, I think, some of the best B2B research that's out there as well. But yeah, if you have others, let me know. I'm curious.
Well, and to both of our points earlier, 6sense hired a former analyst. Carrie's from Forrester, right? I mean,
Yeah,
he's a Forrester
great.
analyst they hired to come in and be a researcher and be a face of research. So it's a strategic decision if you really invest in it. I was going to talk about one that I'm going to write about in my blog in the next month or two about these maturity frameworks. So I've been wanting to write about it for a long time, but earlier, but I don't have the assets, so it stopped me. But I met someone yesterday who is running the same campaign. I think we're going to co-write it. And what we did was we had a product at the time. It was for business process. It was a business process management. So, digital transformation, map out your processes and automate them. And, it was a SaaS sale. And we created this maturity framework that had 5 levels of what, if as you become more advanced as a digitally forward-thinking company and you have automation in place, what are these levels of maturity? And then we set up a survey, an online survey. So back to your kind of survey and proprietary data, where people could fill in facts about themselves around their infrastructure and their business processes and their collaboration between departments and some different like categories we thought of. And then in real time, it populated a report with their answers compared to the norm of everyone. So they got this like really personalized, both like how, data about the market, strategy advice, like thought partner advice, not sales advice, and an asset that they could use and share with their team. And then we had this add-on component, which was a workshop run by a business analyst who would come in and if you got your executives together to talk about your process strategy and business strategy, we'd run this workshop to help everyone be together, which turned out to be the best sales asset ever. So, and the gentleman who's doing it is Suresh Balasubramanian at Meridian Link, and they sell to credit unions. And so they basically have this like trust and credit and financial services maturity model that they share. So again, some of these assets take a long time. They're not like let a junior person write a blog. It's like you kind of can have one really big asset a quarter often. Although, again, Peter at Carta has this like rhythm going and several analysts working on it all the time. But, when you invest in a massive asset, sometimes you get, 10x the response that you otherwise would.
Mhm. What that reminds me of is, back when I used to write definitive guides, at Marketo, we have a 200-page book, and then like, all right, now how do we leak out the content for that, over months? It's kind of they would talk about slicing the turkey up or something, or using every part of the buffalo. That's sort of what I hear you saying in terms of your research.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people do the state of the market, like the Spotify is their unique data, or, kind of what's going on in the overall market and the TAM and how things are changing. Like there's a lot of like deep, rich assets that I think, will continue to be really important because it's something unique that you can't get otherwise.
This
John,
requires
anything else we didn't get to cover that you want to cover?
Well, that last piece, it requires the CMO to make investments in that kind of, creating that kind of content. Um,
Mm-hmm.
which maybe just to wrap, as you said, what we haven't really talked about is metrics. And I'm sort of saying, all right, don't measure marketing like a gumball machine. Don't measure marketing like MQLs. Well, then what should we measure marketing on? Um, and I've got, I'm sort of starting to form a point of view around how do we get better at quantifying our impact on, kind of the brand side of things. It was inspired by a conversation I had with Lena Waters, who's the CMO over at Grammarly. Uh, and she was talking about like her number one priority is to change how people think and feel about Grammarly. That it's they don't see that so they don't perceive it as the tool that the kids use to check their grammar, but that it's an enterprise AI solution, right? And their whole executive team agrees that there's nothing more important than getting their buyers to think about them in the right way. So she has a very clear metric. right? What percentage of her audience thinks about her that way? So what she said she did is she's just basically did like, I think it's one fewer trade show, and took those same dollars and put them into a tracking study to measure that, and she can go back to her board and say, look, we're moving the needle on this thing that we said that we all really, really care about. You know,
The hardest part of that is just what a slow burn it is. So when I ran an awareness advertisement for Oracle, I was spending 40 to 80 million dollars a year and running that survey. And it's a multi-year strategy. And you're right that the board and the CEO have to be committed that you're building a brand. You're building a brand for the long term that's going to return compounding interest, but possibly not all in the first year. And that's hard / impossible with some PE-backed companies with smaller time windows. But
which is
certainly
why
that
we have
it makes a
yeah,
big difference. And I can see it with the Atlassian now, right? Like part of the reason Atlassian's been so successful is the like continuing build, not just
yeah.
the in-year returns.
Yeah, it's undeniable that it's hard that the time that these brand benefits pay off is longer than the tenure of the average CMO. And it's why it's so important to have these more strategic discussions that we sort of talked about, about what is the role of marketing and how we're
Yeah.
going to probably
Yeah.
as good a spot to end on as anything. But as always, it's fabulous talking to you.
Well, it's great to talk to you too. I'm super excited to see and try out Stealth Tool TBD. And I think we'll talk for a couple more minutes until the next speakers are here, since it's an open Zoom forum. I was going to answer one question. Someone asked who I follow. Same question as you. I follow you, and some of the folks you mentioned. One person that's maybe relevant to one conversation. There's a woman named Samantha McKenna, was a LinkedIn salesperson and now runs executives LinkedIn for many
Yep.
top companies where executives aren't good at that. And I actually follow her stuff pretty closely to get all my own tips on like working the system. I follow Lisa Adams
Sure.
on AI. I follow the Marketing AI Institute. That's probably one of the podcasts I listen to weekly. And I also follow this woman named Allie, and I can't think of what her last name is, but she's like the #1 AI person. She worked at AWS and then Google. She's like a LinkedIn super influencer. So if someone knows what Allie's last name is, I couldn't find it fast on my LinkedIn. But I get all my like market news from her. And then lastly, Tomasz Tungus, I don't know how to say his name, who is a VC for Theory Ventures and has his own blog. It's the only blog that I let come into my inbox directly. And then to your point, John, I have them auto populating into different tabs to come back and
Yep.
read, but I read his in real time. So,
Yep.
um,
Good stuff.
well, thanks for having us. Julia, are you still here?
Yeah,
Yep.
thanks so much. If you were to start a company today, Carol and John, you did actually still in stealth, but what would be your first hire and why?
Well,
Well,
his co-founder, his technical
yeah, yeah,
co-founder.
you have to hire a CTO. Yeah, I don't code. So, my first hire was a technical CTO, and my second one was a chief scientist because I don't build machine learning models either. Um, I think my hunch is behind her question is what's the first go-to-market hire?
Exactly.
Um, I think that depends a lot on your skills as kind of who you are as the founder. In my case, I can do the marketing. Um, I think I felt comfortable thinking about founder-led sales to sell to certain companies. But, my new company, I want to be focusing on kind of mid-market and enterprise companies. So let's just say 500 employees and above. That's a more complex enterprise sale I have less experience with. So I'm thinking about my first go-to-market hire being somebody who can help me kind of do the more up-market sales.
What
Hopefully
about
that
you,
answers.
Carol?
Meaning a salesperson, not a marketer.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I advise a lot of companies and talk to a lot of really early stage founders, and it's difficult because marketers know that there's kind of multiple different brains in marketing. There's this data and analyst and process oriented brain, and there's this kind of creative strategy business slower brain, and it's not slower, but thinks less in urgent checking results and more and like, how's this all going to work together? And it's difficult because an early stage startup, you can't usually hire both at the same time. You kind of got to pick. So yeah, to John's point, a lot of early stage founders do the product marketing more themselves and get someone to come in and build the demand generation engine. But ultimately you really need both for the CEO to focus across the business. And that's when we get a product marketing team and a demand gen team.
But maybe we don't think
Someday a
about
brand
it.
and creative team.
Yeah, maybe we don't think about it as a demand gen team, but kind of, how we're going to really move the needle on experiences and relationships and original content.
Yeah, the experience team.
Yeah.
After you rename chief marketing officer, you'll have to rename the demand gen team to their new
I tried to
profession.
do that for a company I'm on the board of. They hired a director of field marketing, and I was like, why don't you call the director of experiences? So,
There we go. I like it.
all
Well,
right.
thanks again, Julia, for having us. And hi, Mark and Nick and Lisa.
Hey,
Excited for
everyone.
Thank you so
Great to
much
see you. Hey,
again.
Mark. Hey, John. Good to see you a long time.
Good to see you all. All
Fabulous
right.
interview. Great job, everyone.
I know it's a party, Lisa. It's nice.
All right. Tag
Okay,
out. You guys can tag in.
Okay, we're gonna go
thanks
off
again.
the speaker
Yeah.
Speaker Sim. Bye.